Hi guys, so I've had a couple of questions lately about sucking in, pelvic floor, Kegals, and all of that stuff. And it's something that I'm going into a lot in my postnatal fitness certification. So I wanted to jump in here because I think doing this live as a video is going to be way easier to explain than it is via typing. So what I want you to think about is what your core is. So your core is like a cylinder. So the top is your diaphragm, the bottom is your pelvic floor, then you've got the sides of your cylinder, which is your obliques and your transverse abdominis, so your abdominal wall. The front is your rectus abdominis, and then of course you've got all your paraspinals down the back, so all those back muscles. Now that makes up this whole canister, so top, bottom, and around. Now, what happens with this canister when you breathe is as you inhale, your diaphragm drops and your pelvic floor drops, okay? So when you inhale, everything expands up here, but your diaphragm drops down, which puts pressure, and it should, on your pelvic floor. So when you inhale, you should feel your pelvic floor widen, get slightly heavier, and this is a good thing, okay? And then when you exhale, everything recoils back up. So your diaphragm lifts, your pelvic floor lifts, your ribs and everything all come in and reform that cylinder. So it's kind of like this wave that happens. Now, if you disrupt that, then that's when other issues come in. So I know you've seen this diagram, but let's have a look at it. So here's my diaphragm, my pelvic floor, my obliques and TVAs, my back muscles, my rectus abdominis. Now when you suck in, and when I mean suck in, I don't mean like, you know, people call you zip up, or some people try to say belly button to spine, but really they're not meaning just your belly button to spine. I just feel like that's a really bad terminology. But when you suck in or put a corset on. Now when I'm talking about a corset, I'm meaning those ones which they say are waist shapers. So the ones which really suck in. Look what happens, right? See this big bulging pressure down here? That's your pelvic floor. So when you suck in, everything's pushing down and up, because this is your core. It works together. So when this goes down, the pressure comes down here on the pelvic floor, and that's fine, and the space takes up, okay? So you expect your back to expand, your ribs to expand, your belly to expand, because you're pushing it down, right? So let's push it down. So everything expands. This is good. When you release, everything comes back to normal, okay? That's what's meant to happen. When you squeeze in the middle, your diaphragm goes in the wrong place. It comes up, which causes your ribs to flare. And your pelvic floor gets squeezed, which causes you to pee your pants. Nobody wants you to pee your pants. Or it can cause prolapse. Now, it's a scary number of people who have pelvic floor issues after pregnancy, over 50%. Majority of us don't even know that we have them, and they only turn up as we get older. So over 65, most people, I think it's 65% of the population have pelvic floor issues when we're over 65. So the more you do this now, the more the muscles down here are going to have pressure and expand and weaken. And if you don't now, later when we get older and our muscles naturally weaken, you will have more issues. So what's right, what's wrong? This is how you breathe. So I was at the library with my daughter, so I'm not exactly dressed for it. But when you breathe and your diaphragm goes down, you should feel a 360-degree pressure. So remember this, everything goes down. So it's 360 degrees. So if you belly breathe, if you put your hands here and you belly breathe, like this, See, my stomach goes in and out, but my ribs don't move. That means you're belly breathing, and that means your diaphragm's not working properly, which can cause issues. But when you breathe properly and you do an inhale, did you see how my back, my ribs went out, my back went out, then my belly went out? So and then my pelvic floor felt heavier and wider, okay? So what I want you all to do right now is grab your hands, put them on your ribs, and see what happens when you breathe. So if your hands, and put them back here, if your hands go like this, right, then you're a rib thruster, so you're doing it wrong. Rib thrusting, okay? So that means your back's too tight and you don't have any mobility in your ribs. So if you're a rib thruster, like this, the best thing you can do is do that side lying breathing, so where you're lying on your side and you're forcing this up, or the full squat, so when you're holding on to some weights and then you're in a full squat and there's nothing for your body to do except expand out the back because you can't use it in your belly or thrust your ribs. If your ribs don't move at all, like this, you're a belly breather. And if you're a belly breather, you're not getting all the oxygen that you need into your diaphragm, into your lungs and everything. And you don't have that connection between your pelvic floor and your diaphragm. So your belly's taking it all. So what this often means is people end up with pelvic floor issues because they don't understand the connection, okay? So mentally, this is one of the most important things that you can do for yourself after pregnancy, is to be able to feel your diaphragm connecting with your pelvic floor. So now try again and see if you can make your ribs go out to the side. So watch. Okay? See how my fingers go out to the side? And if you watch from the back, you'll also see my back expand. Now, if you're doing this lying on your back, you should feel your back sort of press into the floor as your ribs expand sideways, your back expands. You will feel your pelvic floor widen, get heavier, and your belly will go out. But it won't go all the way out. Like if you're belly breathing, all that air goes into your belly. And that's really bad for your diastasis because you're wanting to remove the pressure from here. So you don't want to belly breathe because that's just pressure on your diastasis, no pressure on your diastasis. Pressure on your diastasis, no pressure. But to fully breathe, it will come into your belly. It just won't push your belly out. Okay? Now, it is a really hard thing to get, but it's the number one thing that will help you heal your diastasis and stop pelvic floor issues. Okay? So what I want you to practice doing is these full breaths, feeling your pelvic floor go down, and then everything recoils. So watch this. As I exhale, my ribs come down, my sides come in, my back comes in, my pelvic floor comes up. My TVAs, if you're pushing it, will engage as well. Your back will be supported. Now, I said Kegals aren't a great thing. They are. Don't take that the wrong way. But only doing Kegals can cause your pelvic floor to be hypertonic, which means it's too tight. So now imagine anything that's too tight actually ends up weak. And a weak pelvic floor isn't a good pelvic floor. So I want you to really think, Kegals are great and you should do them, but this connection breath between your diaphragm expanding, putting the pressure down, then recoiling and everything coming back up is more important for you to get than just the Kegel. Because when you think about when you do a squat, you're going to inhale, let everything relax, and exhale, it all pulls up. And as that becomes automatic, your everyday movements will become naturally safe, both for your diastasis and for your pelvic floor. So I was also going to say one more thing. And so I know we've got our sugar challenge group going, and please join if you're interested. What I wanted to tell you a little bit about is the connective tissue. And as I said, I'm doing the postnatal fitness, and what I thought was really, really interesting was some analogies that they gave. So what I want to tell you, whilst I've got you, is your connective tissue. Now this works for both your pelvic floor and your diastasis because they're both connective tissue, just in different places. So a connective tissue, I know I've said this before, like a hair elastic. You know when you've got a new hair elastic and you only need to tie it around your hair twice and it holds. And then you take it out and it recoils to the correct position. Think of it like that. It's kind of like that first pregnancy, right? Your connective tissue, it expands, it's all great, and then it recoils for most people. Same thing, pelvic floor, everything's expanded, it recoils, just like that hair elastic. So now think about using that hair elastic multiple times. So I've tied it around twice, then I've tied it around twice, and then the next day I tie it around twice, and each time I put it on the side, beside my bed when I go to bed, and over the night, it kind of recoils back to its original shape. Now, one day, it's not going to recoil quite as much, and you're going to have to tie your hair around 3 times, not just the twice that you've done it every other time. Now, when that gets to that point, if you put it away and put it aside, it may naturally recoil a little bit, okay? Now, that's why I am so desperate for you guys to take the pressure off your abdominal wall. So if your muscles are always having bloating, so you always have pressure, think of it like that hair tie. You're not getting to put it on the side to rest it, to let it recoil. So if you continually have bloating, so that may be that you don't reduce the sugar intake you have, or you know gluten or grains is bad for you, but you like it so much you're just going to continue eating it, right? If you don't reduce that bloating, you're not reducing the pressure. It's the same thing with your posture. If you always have posture like this and you're putting that pressure on your pelvic, on your abdominal wall, so whether it be because you hunch or you have an anterior pelvic tilt, or even this position here, the posterior pelvic tilt will put pressure on your pelvic floor. And remember, connective tissue in your pelvic floor too. So same thing, you want to take pressure off it. So if you're always in a posterior pelvic tilt, you always have pressure on your pelvic floor. If you're always in an anterior pelvic tilt, you have pressure coming in your abdominal wall. If you're in a hunched position, you're likely to have pressure on both because you're likely to have that tilt and the hunch, so you're putting pressure on both positions. And that's why in the Total Core Solution, I work so hard on the weights program to improve your posture, the non-bloating food plan so that we reduce that abdominal pressure, the HIIT workout so that you can start losing any pounds you need to lose if you have to lose weight, but also the core work, which you need as well to help heal the diastasis. So I know I keep going on and on and on about posture, bloating, breathe correctly, but there is a reason to that, and that's to take the pressure off both your abdominal wall and your pelvic floor. So I really hope that this helped. And whenever you're thinking, I just want to like squeeze myself into something, think what you're doing. Right? You're going to pee your pants. Squeeze or pee, right? Like, let yourself work back naturally. Now, if you're going to a special occasion and you need something, like, totally go for it. I understand. But not day in, day out. If you need to wear a binder, a simple 3-panel binder, which will cost you like $25, is good enough. And wear it so that you can still do this whole expansion. Because if you can't breathe properly, you can't work with your pelvic floor and you can't release that pressure in both areas. Okay, I really hope this helped, and if you do have any questions, post them below and I will answer them later. Okay, see ya.